Hi friends, so you probably think the title's a little interesting, and you might be wondering what I mean by no, Greta Thunberg is not a 16-year-old evil genius who is basically leading people up the garden path and is being groomed by the capitalist class to placate us. I've noticed on a number of left sites there's an article going around by Corey Morningstar, and it's about basically Greta Thunberg is being is almost like being groomed by the capitalist class, as I've put in the title, to keep us placated so that nothing really changes in relation to the climate crisis. That's what I recall from the article, and it's almost as if she's been groomed for a while to do this. Now, Greta Thunberg, or Greta Thunberg, that's, I think, sort of how she pronounces her name. She's a Swedish climate activist who was sitting outside the Swedish Parliament at one point every day for a couple of weeks, and she held a sign which was school strike for the climate. And the Swedish Parliament didn't really take much notice of her until she started becoming famous, until she started getting traction. But she was doing that of her own volition, from what I understand. It's not some sort of evil scheming plot by the powers that be. And it just so happens that it's, for some reason, and I'm not sure why, I guess it's probably to do with advertising. When people become popular, all corporate media jump on that because they can see advertising dollars. So they jump on it and they start to promote this person too. I would say that's what is happening there, why she's so widespread in the mainstream media now, is because they see advertising dollars. It's got really nothing to do with climate change, climate crisis, because the corporate media have been very good at ignoring that issue for many, many years now. So I would say that's what's going on there. And that includes, if she gets a photo on Time magazine, anything that, will sell magazines, anything that will sell advertising dollars. So anyway, I've noticed a few on the left have been sort of making out as if she's some evil genius, 16-year-old evil genius who's, is gathering people to this movement so that then she can basically say that, that's all we need to do is just protest, which of course Indigenous people have been protesting this catastrophe, this coming catastrophe, the climate emergency, for a very long time. She happens to be a white young girl. Now, there's a few things I just find it sort of astonishing that, of course, we should question everything. And I sort of feel like until Greta Thunberg starts sounding like a politician and starts telling people, that all you need to do is change some light bulbs or drive an electric car, or if she, basically starts, sort of backpedaling on what she's been saying. Until she starts doing that, I think people should consider that she might be sincere. I mean, truly. And on top of this, if you see her holding up signs like she did, she held up a sign about Russia and Hong Kong, and they should be, basically having, it was a bit of a dig at the fact that they freely protest. I remember the actual sign, but it was sort of something to the effect of, Russia and China, Russia and Hong Kong being able to protest. Now, she's as much a victim of the propaganda promoted by the mainstream media and by politicians. So people should cut her some slack if she does something like that, something that feeds into the anti-Russian propaganda or the anti-Chinese propaganda, which is very common right now. I think people should cut her some slack because, most people are propagandized about that because it's relentless, the propaganda by the mainstream media about Russia and China. So I think, as I said, people should cut her some slack with that. But anyway, she gives amazing speeches, and I've actually talked about her in the past in relation to her posing with Obama. And there's a photo with Obama standing there. It's a black and white photo, and she's looking down at the ground. It's a very sort of an odd photo. There's another one with her doing a fist bump with Obama. Now, she doesn't really know anything about what these people are up to, what these politicians are up to. She's a 16-year-old child, basically. And as I said, will be as propagandized as any other person, most people in the public, about this party, the U.S. Democratic Party, which is just another wing of the duopoly. It's a warmongering party. It serves the corporate interests. It's corporate government. It's inverted totalitarianism. She probably hasn't read any Truthdig articles. She probably doesn't know about the Grey Zone. She probably doesn't know about Chris Hedges. She probably doesn't know about the Black Agenda Report and all that sort of thing, unfortunately. And the more and more famous she becomes, the less likely she's ever going to come across those alternate, independent, real news, basically. And that's too bad, but that's unfortunately how it goes. So the more famous she is, the more in a bubble she'll be. So she'll probably never really quite understand that the U.S. Democratic Party and people like Obama, who's a war criminal and who's basically skited about how he'd helped the oil industry at the end of his presidency. You can see a little video of him skiting about that to them and saying, just say thank you. You know, I increased your profits. She probably doesn't know about that. She probably, you know, she's 16 years old. So she's a child. She has been probably she's been so caught up in her climate activism, and because she has, as she said herself, autism, she has done a tremendous amount of research into the climate emergency. And she also talks regularly with climate scientists. Hopefully she talks with the ones that aren't from the IPCC, which is a very conservative organization. But if she does, you know, she says because of her autism, she tends to really super focus on certain issues. But that means she's probably has no idea about other issues. So, you know, I'm not a Greta Thunberg apologist or anything, but I'm just pointing out some facts, what I think are fairly obvious things that would happen to somebody of that age, and the people who would try and co-opt her, and Obama and anybody that will, you know, anybody, the U.S. Democratic Party, anybody who can co-opt her and make themselves look better or make themselves look like they are sincere or they care, like Obama. He's co-opting her in photos. The optics of that for Obama looks good. You know, it looks like he is right on board with what she's about. And her minders, unfortunately, they're either clueless or they're in on it, but I'd have to say that they're probably as clueless as she is, and they think it's probably a good thing. I don't think she for 1 minute thinks that politicians are our friends necessarily, but I don't think she's that silly. Even though she's 16, I don't think she's silly enough to believe that. But, you know, maybe her minders think that it's a good idea to be photographed with these people. I don't. So that's unfortunate, but I do not think that means that they have co-opted her. I think it means that her minders are either clueless or, you know, something like that, as clueless as she is about what they're really about, the capitalist class. So, you know, I think, you know, one has to keep these in mind, about these points in mind when seeing the future and what she's involved in. Like I said, if she starts sounding like a politician, or if she starts trying to get people to become complacent, or that, you know, she warns against nonviolent civil disobedience, which she's not doing. She's actually, well, firstly, and this is something Extinction Rebellion should take a leaf out of her book, she's an ethical vegan. When I say ethical, she's ethical because she doesn't want to use animals, and two, she's a vegan because she doesn't want to participate in the tremendous destruction animal agriculture wreaks on the planet.
And then also I am vegan, and I have shop stop. It means that you don't buy new things, consume new things unless you absolutely have to. So, and just these small things I can do in my everyday life, apart from activism and highlighting the problem.
So in terms of being a vegan, explain what that means.
That I don't use any products made from, I don't eat, for example,
any animal product.
Any animal products. I don't use any animal products, both because of ethical and environmental and climate reasons.
In terms of clothes, you don't buy new clothes?
No. Either I buy secondhand, or I receive clothes from someone else, or I just keep my own clothes, maybe use my sister's clothes or my mother's or father's clothes, and yeah,
And I'll show you those two memes. So she has done her homework and realizes the tremendous effects animal agriculture has on the planet and how it's a major driver of the sixth mass extinction and of the climate crisis. So that's something that Extinction Rebellion should wake up and stop pretending veganism is some sort of personal choice and hasn't really got anything to do with anything, or downplay it or whatever. They should cut that out and start getting on board with something that is a moral imperative for all of us. Okay, so firstly, she's an ethical vegan, and secondly, she's for nonviolent civil disobedience. Well, you know, that's something that's really important. I think that's absolutely the answer now, nonviolent civil disobedience. I think that that's the only way the capitalist class is going to listen, is when we start interfering with their business so much that it starts to become completely dysfunctional. That's what Chris Hedges has suggested as well. Nonviolent civil disobedience really at this point is the only avenue, I think. And so she's not against that. So if she was against that and she started telling people don't do that, then you would have to start to wonder what's happening, right? So I think, you know, it's something that we should keep in mind, that when you start to mess with the profits of the capitalist class, that's when they either start militarized policing everything and doing what they're doing to the yellow vests in France, and that's likely to happen. So at some point, and there'll probably be people that will die, because at some point if people don't start doing nonviolent civil disobedience at this point in time, later on it will just be violence. It'll be violence basically. Because if you don't give people an avenue to be nonviolent and to protest, then the next step is violence. So the capitalist class should really, really wake up. The oligarchs, people like Obama and the like, should wake up, because at some point, if the public isn't listened to with the non-violent civil disobedience, then the next thing is violence, and that's where the pitchforks and guillotines come in. But of course, there'll probably be more dead on the side of the public because of the incredible military force that these Western countries have now, and the US has been preparing for this social breakdown for a long time. The Pentagon has talked about this. So anyway, I'm getting off the track, but back to Greta Thunberg. I think people should be really, really supporting this young woman. I don't think she's been co-opted yet by the capitalist class. I think that her minder has made some poor decisions, being filmed, being photographed with Obama and people like that. I think that's a poor decision. But as I said, she's only 16, and maybe her minder is probably a bit clueless in that regard. That he or she doesn't know the extent to which these people are as bad as the GOP. They're as bad as they're totally on board with protecting the oil industry and fracking and all of that. They've all profited off it. They're all into protecting it, and they will go kicking and screaming into the night to avoid having to do anything. It's all about maintaining the status quo with the powers that be. So people should cut us some slack, and I'm sort of astonished and sort of shocked when I hear there's a couple of conspiracies going around now by people on the left, otherwise intelligent people, and I find it sort of shocking in a way. There's one particular journalist who is fairly popular and on the left, and she is a climate denier. She thinks that it's some sort of a hoax. She agrees with the guy James Corbett, who also has the Corbett report on YouTube, and he promotes this idea that it's all a part of the capitalist class trying to making out there's some sort of climate emergency so that they can profit off all the things that happen to address it. So it's like it's some sort of green hoax. and there are other people I found out recently, otherwise intelligent people on the left, who also seem to agree with that. And the other thing that they also support as a conspiracy on top of that, which I just find absolutely, like, this is some sort of like a sickness. When people start thinking that, when people start sort of ignoring in some ways the science and everything becomes a conspiracy, it's a kind of a sickness. It's when you get people thinking that every single mass shooting that happens, that all the people in that mass shooting are crisis actors. It starts to become a sickness, you know? And I find that really kind of disturbing. It makes me want to just throw my hands up and leave, you know, and just give up. Because I sort of think, wow, you know, these are otherwise intelligent people going in that direction. And they end up doing the fossil fuel industry's work for them, because they basically indicate to their followers that it's all, that things aren't as bad as what the, you know, as what is being made out. Things aren't as bad as that. And so, you know, you can basically just, you know, chill out and don't fall for it. You know, they're basically doing the fossil fuel industry's work for them. And you could almost, if I didn't know better, I'd think these people were agents provocateurs or something. They were sort of, you know, but see, that's the thing. I don't think they are, but I feel like there's almost like this, there are people on the left that are so freaked out by the science that they can't accept it, and they start to deal with it psychologically. They start to invent these conspiracy theories, or maybe they're just so used to looking for things that they end up creating this whole narrative about everything. And I see this happening again and again. You can actually create narratives about a whole lot of things if you really try. And just because, as I said, just because Greta Thunberg is getting traction in the corporate media, it doesn't necessarily mean that she happens to be a problem and that she's actually being groomed by the capitalist class to lead everybody up to the slaughterhouse floor sort of thing. It doesn't mean that. She's not some sort of Judas goat. You know what I mean? Look that up and you'll understand what I mean. She's not, I don't believe that she's like that. So, but, you know, one can invent all sorts of conspiracies if one doesn't want to psychologically accept that there is a climate crisis in progress, and it actually is probably a runaway at this point, which all evidence looks like it. And I had a discussion privately with someone who actually is on board with this whole green hoax thing, that this climate, who's otherwise a very intelligent person, who's anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, and so forth. And he totally thinks that it's, and got very offended when I said, look, things are getting too serious to be entertaining that sort of conspiracy stuff like that. You know? I mean, and I said, you know, people who start promoting that idea that this is just, this so-called climate emergency is some sort of a way of the capitalist class making more money on green, renewable stuff and all of that, and that it's a way of keeping capitalism going. You know, this climate emergency, it's the result of end-stage capitalism and patriarchy, etc., but it's not, it's its own thing. You know, it is, the science is clear, and everybody needs to get on board with that. The science is clear that things are sort of dire, and there's feedback loops happening and all sorts of things. Like the East Siberian Arctic shelf is melting, and there's a huge amount of methane under the East Siberian Arctic shelf. It's been melting now for years, but it's accelerating because everything's getting warmer, and so the permafrost melts. And even if, and I've said this before, even if 1% of that methane rose up into the atmosphere, it would actually increase the global temperatures a few degrees Celsius in a few years. And it would be absolutely, well, all over. But it's actually happening, and it's happening 70 years ahead of time. A recent report said the permafrost in that area is melting 70 years ahead of time. And this huge sort of, you can see these massive amounts of where the permafrost is melted, and mammoth bones are coming up, like ancient fossils are coming up that have been locked away for millions of years. So I'm not trying to be, I'm being realistic. I believe in if a doctor tells you you have cancer and all the evidence is there, the science and all of that, you have cancer, then you have to accept it, really. I'm not saying, short of a miracle, like I've said before, I'm not trying to, people can see this as pessimistic or whatever. I don't stop doing activism, even though I think that it's too late. I'm not going to sit here and put a happy face on a disaster. I'm not going to do that. And people may not like that and may, sort of think, oh no, I don't want to listen to her. That's fine. But I don't believe in putting happy faces on disasters because I think, that sort of hopium, that word that some people use, I think that's very, very, I think it's basically patronizing people, treating them like children, and it's not giving anybody an opportunity to prepare for the future. And also, we can still do stuff. I'm not going to stop doing activism, whether it's online or offline, to address this. I do think it's sort of going to be the end of us this century, and much earlier than we think. Not the end of the century, but somewhere in the middle. But that doesn't mean I'm going to give up, because we can mitigate the coming catastrophe and maybe some other species will survive. But also, why would I do that anyway? I care about people and I care about other animals, and I want people to go vegan. Firstly, because animals are not our property, they never were, they're not our resources, and they deserve the right not to be used as property. And I want also the planet not to be destroyed for them, completely destroyed. This is their home too. 99.99% of the planet's population are non-human. I don't want that destroyed for them. That it's their planet too. But, there are lots of people who are completely innocent in this that are not, our Western civilization has produced most of this disaster for the planet, and there are a lot of indigenous people, they weren't involved in this, and, we're destroying they haven't done anything to deserve this. The people in the Amazon rainforest, the major driver of that destruction in the Amazon rainforest is animal agriculture. It's been for a very long time now, ever since I've been vegan, which is 15 years, I've known that 1 acre every minute has been destroyed to make way for animal agriculture and soy to feed animals in other feedlots globally. Animals being fed in feedlots globally. I've known that for at least 15 years. And now it's 2.5 acres every minute now because of Bolsonaro, who's a fascist in Brazil, the fascist leader of Brazil. He doesn't care about the Amazon rainforest. He doesn't care about any of that. The capitalist class in general, whether they're fascist dictators or bordering on fascist dictators, or they're just like Obama or whomever, they don't care. And capitalism, end-stage capitalism, is ecocide. Non-veganism is ecocide. And I'll say that again. Being non-vegan is elitist, and it is leading to the ecocide of the planet. Non-veganism is elitist, and it's leading to the ecocide of the planet. Now, I know that some people don't want to hear that. They don't want to believe it. But that's a fact. It's a science fact. Be a science denier if you don't want to take that on board. Cherry-pick science if you need to. But that's a fact. So, if a 16-year-old, Greta Thunberg, can get that she needs to be vegan because it's the right thing to do for other animals, and it's the right thing to do to address the climate emergency, surely adults, people that are much older than her can get that, right? Surely. Can't we, a 16-year-old is being more ethical and more sensible than most people I know. Holy crap. Holy crap is all I can say to that. I mean, the fact that a 16-year-old's having to go around the planet on sailboats, etc., to address Congress and things like that. I mean, these people know what they're doing. These people know what they're doing. They don't need a 16-year-old child to tell them. They don't need school children to tell them. They know what they're doing and they don't care. Now, Greta Thunberg has said, I refuse to think that these people are evil. I don't like the word evil, but I think sadly, I know she probably doesn't want to think they're evil, but I think that they're so incredibly arrogant and their hubris that they think that they can survive this because of their money and their power. They think they can survive this climate emergency, this climate catastrophe. They think they can survive it. That's the hubris. I think money, having too much money and too much power, dulls your senses a bit. You start living in a sort of a God realm, and you don't really understand. You don't really, you're not in touch with reality. So anyway, no bunker will be big enough or will be able to endure the next 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 years, probably that long at least. Probably it may be a million years, many millions before this planet is able to be habitable on the surface. So good luck to those ning-nongs who think that they can, survive in a bunker. Imagine their children, how they'll be feeling about them. Gee, thanks, Mum and Dad, for making this planet a fucking disaster. So I can't live and enjoy it, and we have to live in this fucking bunker? Thanks, Mum and Dad. Yes, all our money, we can roll around in our money down here in the bunker. I mean, they're not going to be able to survive. So anyway, they may not be evil people. I think they're just completely out of touch. I think they're completely out of touch with reality, is what I think. Anyway, that's not a good advertisement for having so much money that you're completely out of touch with the imminent human extinction, is it? Anyhow, so this whole thing about the green hoax, that this climate emergency is really just a green hoax, and that's put forward by people like James Corbett, and that that overpopulation, there's no such thing as overpopulation being a problem. That's another one. I've talked about this before. I did a whole video on it. You can check it out. That is ridiculous. You could just even put it in terms of, imagine shoving people into a room, a finite room, with a certain amount of resources, a limited amount, finite resources, and a finite room. And you just keep putting people in there and putting people in there and putting people in there. What do you think's going to happen? I mean, it's just, I don't know, it frightens me how otherwise intelligent people can think that way. I mean, I had somebody arguing with me about this, saying this is all made up, that overpopulation is a problem for the planet. Just putting aside that for a second, just think about, why do we think that our species is so important that we can absolutely dominate and exploit the planet when there are 99.99% of the planet's population are non-human, and it's their planet too? That's just human supremacy. Why do we think that that's okay, that we can do that? You see, this is in line with imperialism. Imperialists think that it's okay to just go into other countries, destroy them, dominate the people there, or kill them, and then take their resources. This is it's the same mindset. Human supremacy, white supremacy, imperialism, it's all the same mindset. So if we think it's okay to go around, Western imperialism, go around and invade countries for their resources and put in corporations, set up and manage chaos situations so we can always be feeding off them, and they're left in ruins and the people are destroyed psychologically and physically. If we think that that's okay, and a lot of us must because there's no anti-war movement to speak of, then we obviously would also, of course, think that it's okay to just keep breeding and breeding and breeding on this planet until, we've basically destroyed any sort of habitat, in quotes, because this whole planet is their habitat. But we keep destroying their habitats because we think we're way more important than these other animals. So we just keep breeding and breeding, and now we're in overshoot and collapse, because we're going to start collapsing as a species. This is what happens to any species that overshoots and collapse, they actually end up with, they don't have enough resources and they start to die off. But we're doing worse than that. We've actually managed to completely change the climate now, and we've got droughts everywhere and flooding, and it's insane. So anyway, you know, it is insane. This whole system is not conducive to mental health. I've said this before. It's not conducive to mental health, what's been going on. Neoliberalism, end-stage capitalism, the constant warmongering, and all of that. It's not conducive for mental health, and the breakdown of communities which is the result of neoliberalism and capitalism. So all these systems, they have to go. We need a vision for the future. And I'd say that that young girl, Greta Thunberg, is sadly, I think she knows that things are probably over for us all. But she still goes on, right? And people should be in great admiration of that young woman. And I think there's a certain amount of misogyny from some people who can't stand the idea of a young girl that's 16 getting so much traction and people are listening to her and she's so articulate. I really do. I think there's misogyny involved in that. It's just this sort of, you know, they just can't stand it. And misogyny runs deep, sadly, in our society. You only have to see all the awful toxic stuff on social media. So I think there's misogyny in that. But also I just think some people on the left in particular, I mean, the right is rife with all sorts of conspiracy theories because it's almost like reality TV in a way. It's just sort of addictive. People just like inventing them. And of course, there are a lot of things that are, turns out there's a lot of things that have been real, that have been labeled conspiracies by the CIA. That's a sort of a way of sort of putting down things that are actually real. But there are things that, I mean, when people start to look as everything is a conspiracy, every single thing that happens, that's when it starts to get really problematic. And you actually start becoming almost like the right in a way, almost like the people that are trying to keep things as they are. You actually are assisting them in a way. And this idea that this climate emergency is some sort of green hoax, and so don't buy it, you know, don't buy it and stuff. That's sort of helping this to keep the status quo. And if we keep the status quo, well, we're destined to be it's destined, aren't we, to be finished. So, you know, some people on the left have just got to get a grip. I mean, if they're having trouble dealing with psychologically with this possible imminent human extinction, then maybe they need to talk to some people and talk about it and maybe grieve and then do something. Don't just sort of roll over and die. Do something. Do something to make things better for other animals, meaning go vegan. I mean, that prevents the torture and killing of, you know, being vegan prevents the torture and killing of 1 trillion land and aquatic animals plus every year. It prevents the destruction of the oceans. It prevents the destruction of the Amazon rainforest and other rainforests. It addresses world hunger. It addresses the droughts and the rains and the floods and, you know, there's so many, the list is endless almost of becoming vegan, how much of an impact it has. So, you know, there's all sorts of things we can do, and nonviolent civil disobedience is an imperative at this point, because the days for writing letters and pleading with these selfish capitalist class, the oligarchs, is over. They weren't listening for a very long time. This is well overdue. Anyway, I'd really like to see people stop dumping on Greta Thunberg from a great height and inventing lots of conspiracies. If she starts becoming, you know, starts sounding like a politician and whatever, sure, you know, then she's up for, you know, whatever. You know, it's important to keep an eye on people. But I mean, at the present time, I think she's doing a really good job, and it's great to mobilize young people. They need to wake up and stop being submissive to authority. It is really good what she's doing in that regard. Even if she turns out to be completely co-opted by the capitalist class, if she ever turns out to be, which I don't think it will happen like that, but then she's woken up a whole generation of young people to not just sit back and allow our rulers to dictate our fate in all areas. That's a great thing for any young person to learn, to not just be submissive. and to rebel against things that are wrong and laws that are unjust and so forth. That's a fantastic thing to learn. Anyway, I probably could have said more about Greta Thunberg on this, but it's like I'm astonished sometimes at the things that people come up with. It makes me wonder if there's, it just makes me sort of think, God, our species really is too stupid to live. This is the sort of reaction we get to certain things. It just makes me think, jeez. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the notifications bell. YouTube's been unsubscribing people every time I do a particular video on Palestine or something. So just recently, 20 people dropped off, and I don't think that was due to the video and some objection to it. YouTube does do this to people, and they don't like things about Palestine, and they don't like, presenting the facts about what's happening to Palestinians. So, check in every so often if you have subscribed and you have clicked the notifications bell. And if you don't hear from me in a couple of weeks, if you don't get a video from Faint Signals from Vega, it's possible that you've been unsubscribed from my channel. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. Till next time, peace and go vegan. Bye for now.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight? You say you hear us and that you understand the urgency. But no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that. Because if you really understood the situation and still kept on failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe. The popular idea of cutting our emissions in half in 10 years only gives us a 50% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees and the risk of setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control. 50% may be acceptable to you, but those numbers do not include tipping points, most feedback loops, additional warming hidden by toxic air pollution, or the aspects of equity and climate justice. They also rely on my generation sucking hundreds of billions of tons of your CO2 out of the air with technologies that barely exist. So a 50% risk is simply not acceptable to us, we who have to live with the consequences. To have a 67% chance of staying below a 1.5 degrees of global temperature rise, the best odds given by the IPCC, the world had 420 gigatons of CO2 left to emit back on January 1st, 2018. Today that figure is already down to less than 350 gigatons. How dare you pretend that this can be solved with just business as usual and some technical solutions? With today's emissions levels, that remaining CO2 budget will be entirely gone within less than 8.5 years. There will not be any solutions or plans presented in line with these figures here today, because these numbers are too uncomfortable, and you are still not mature enough to tell it like it is. You are failing us, but the young people are starting to understand your betrayal.
The eyes of all future generations are upon you. And if you choose to fail us, I say, we will never forgive you. We will not let you get away with this. Right here, right now, is where we draw the line. The world is waking up, and change is coming whether you like it or not. Thank you.